There is a difference between being cast out and being allowed to drift. Exile is loud. Drift is quiet. Prince Harry was not expelled from the monarchy. He was released into ambiguity, and ambiguity is far more dangerous than rejection. For most of his life, Harry existed inside a defined emotional architecture. Every role was pre-written. Every mistake had a containment plan. Every crisis had handlers whose job was not to judge, but to stabilize. That system didn't just protect his image, it protected his sense of self. And when that system withdrew, it didn't announce its departure. It simply stopped catching him. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They believe Harry left and then consequences followed. In reality, the consequences began when the palace stopped intervening, long before the exit became official. Because once an institution stops shaping your narrative, your identity becomes porous. Harry was no longer the spare. He was no longer the soldier. He was no longer the troubled but loyal prince. He became undefined. And undefined identities seek anchors. Meghan became that anchor, not strategically, psychologically. She was the only structure left that responded immediately, emotionally, affirmatively. In institutional terms, that is catastrophic, because institutions train their members to survive delay, silence, and hierarchy. Personal bonds do not. As the palace retreated, Harry leaned harder into the only relationship that offered certainty, not because he was controlled, but because he was unmoored. This is where the darkness deepens. The palace didn't counter his version of events because doing so would have required re-engagement, and re-engagement would have meant responsibility. Instead, it chose distance. Distance transforms personal pain into public narrative, and public narrative does not heal, it hardens. Each interview Harry gave felt like agency, but structurally, it was exposure. Every uncorrected claim became permanent. Every emotional disclosure removed leverage. Inside institutions, silence is not absence. It is closure. By the time Harry published his memoir, the palace had already accepted that he was no longer returning as a functional insider, not as punishment, as inevitability. Because once someone reframes their identity entirely around grievance, reconciliation becomes structurally impossible. You cannot reintegrate someone who has rewritten their meaning outside the system. That's not exile, that's divergence. And divergence does not end in conflict. It ends in separation. The darkest part is this. Harry did not lose the institution because he spoke. He lost it because the institution realized he would never stop speaking. And institutions cannot coexist with infinite narration. They require containment. When containment fails, detachment follows. From that moment forward, Harry was no longer seen as a problem to be solved. He was seen as a variable to be isolated, which is why nothing dramatic happened. No stripping in public, no counter-memoirs, no open war, just silence. Silence that allowed the world to interpret his words without correction. Silence that ensured every statement would live alone. This is the cruelty of institutional withdrawal. It doesn't destroy you, it lets you reveal yourself without support. Meghan, in this phase, became inseparable from Harry's psychological survival, not because she engineered it, but because she was the only remaining feedback loop, and feedback loops that lack external calibration intensify. Grievance becomes identity, identity becomes mission, mission becomes isolation. The palace understood this pattern. It has seen it before. It knows that individuals burn themselves out faster than institutions ever could. So it waited, not passively, precisely. Today, Harry exists in a permanent state of narration, explaining, clarifying, reframing, and the institution remains silent, because silence at scale wins. This is not a story about punishment. It is a story about withdrawal of meaning. The palace didn't take anything from Harry. It stopped giving him context. And without context, every word floats unanchored. That is the drift. And drift is irreversible, because there is no moment you can point to and say, this is when it ended. It simply becomes clear one day that nothing is holding you anymore.